Listen to the Vibes.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Listen to the Vibes. Very happy to welcome Michael Peterson here. He is an approach coach, transformational guide, and a ceremonialist. So I'm going to let you explain all that. So tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Thanks for having me on, Kyle. So my journey was pretty much like everybody else's that I knew, right? You grow up, you're a kid, you're trying to figure life out. It happens to you. You deal with death, friendships, breakups, learning and growing. And what I realized as I kind of tried to make everybody else's stories mesh with my own was that I just needed to figure out how I wanted to be in life. And not only how did I want to be, but given that, how did I want to approach life? And when I was 14, my dad passed away and kind of sent me off on a nice journey of figuring out what does it mean to be a man? Who am I? And after going through college and then working, I ended up saying, I'm burnt out. People are getting these great jobs, but they're not happy. And I wouldn't be happy even if I got one of these great jobs. And I need to go figure that thing out. And so I took some time off and I ended up studying traditional Amazonian plant medicine, going really down the kind of ayahuasca rabbit hole, if you will. And that involved spending a lot of time by myself, not just working with psychedelic plants, but just time in nature, time by myself. And then as that journey continued, I realized it's kind of like a yoga practice, right? If you're only stretching and doing yoga when you're on the mat, you're going to get a very limited result. And the point of going to work with ayahuasca, or the point of working and doing your yoga practice or of meditating, isn't so that you can meditate or do yoga or sit with ayahuasca. It's so that you can have a impact on your life and that you can have sustained transformation. And so what I got really curious about was, how do we create sustained, lasting transformation throughout our lives? What's the different tools in our tool belt that we can pull from? And I realized that what it really means is that we have a life that is a ceremony. And that means that we're treating it as something sacred. It can be a celebration. There's, ups, downs, and everything around. But there's a container that we're going through. And we get to tend to that container, just like we would tend to a garden or to our favorite little house plant. We're relating to it. And so that kind of landed me at this place of, wow, there's really only a couple of questions. Do you want to engage with life? Yes or no? It's a mystery. You never know what you're going to get. And if the answer is yes, great. How do you want to engage with life? And as soon as you start working with those two things, life becomes a ceremony, and it's just practice and play.
Do you mind if I get a little personal?
Sure, please do.
So you talked about losing your father at 14. Did you find someone to kind of take that role as a father figure in your life?
You know, in some ways, I'm sure the answer is yes. My dad committed when I was 14, and so it was very abrupt. And I was going to an all guys private school at that point in time. I came from a nice upper middle class family, and so I had all of these men around me from being at an all boys school, but there was nobody who could really come in and fill that role.
Of course.
Um, my stepdad did a really good job of kind of holding his own edge, but not trying to replace My dad,
Hmm.
my mom, on the other hand, bless her heart, tried to be both mom and dad, and that's just not something you can do.
Hmm.
And so part of my journey has also been about exploring initiations. And I would say that, one of the things that I've noticed is that 14-year-old going into puberty manhood initiation really doesn't exist too much in our society. And even when it does exist, there's nobody telling us what that initiation means, and what it means to be a man. Or at least in my case, there wasn't. So there was a pretty long exploration of that. And some of my teachers later on definitely highlighted some things for me. But really, life became the teacher. And I had a friend who shared with me that there's always two things that you can learn from somebody: how you want to be and how you don't want to be. And at the end of the day, the only person that we're responsible to looking back on at the end of our lives and saying, am I okay with how I lived my life? If we take it outside of the spiritual realm, is yourself, right? It's like, can you look back at your life and say, I am okay with how it went? And that's a question that I think we all have to work with. It's a very long-winded answer to a very simple question that you had, which was, no, I don't think there was ever anybody who really came in and could have replaced my dad at that point.
Mm. I can kind of share that with you because now I was in my 20s, but my father did the same thing.
Mm,
And that was kind of the moment where I decided I didn't want to be like my dad.
mm,
And I worry about that because I've suffered depression, anxiety, all these different things. And now I'm at a stage in my life where I don't know if it's just normal, I'm forgetting things, or I have a hard time conveying my message.
mm.
And so I'm like, am I turning into him? And that's one of the reasons why I've looked into alternative healing methods, things along that line. When I first was diagnosed with the depression, anxiety, PTSD, all they want to do is throw pills at you. And be quite honest with you, I think they did more damage than they did help. One of the alternative healing methods that I looked into was meditation. Now, do you help people that are going through similar things like I am?
I absolutely work with people who are in a similar situation. So, my dad, he was diagnosed as bipolar, but he also had a pretty heavy relationship with alcohol. He worked a really high stress job, had anxiety, was prescribed anti-anxiety meds, sleeping meds, antidepressants, had a fun relationship with cocaine, and drank all at the same time. That's a cocktail for disaster, you know. And I think for me, what I've found is that addiction, substance abuse, depression, they're generally not the issues. They are the symptoms. And so, when I look around the world, sometimes I'm like, it makes tons of sense to have some depression, or to say, hey, what the heck is going on? How are we supposed to be in this? But I do think that question that both of our parents said no to, rather, was like, do you want to engage with life? You know, if the answer is no, I'm not gonna be here to say that you have to. You don't. What I find generally is that the tension that comes from depression is that there's a part of you that really wants to be alive and wants to engage with life. And then you've got another part that it's struggling for whatever reason. And so I can work on the kind of energetic foundational components there that go beyond just the psychologization of everything, right? This is basically like, do you want to engage with life? How do you want your energy to work? How does your energy currently work? Let's look at those patterns and habits and build that foundation up and figure out how do I say this? If you are approaching life the wrong way, it's gonna hurt. And if something continuously hurts, you're gonna want to stop doing it. And so if when that's happening, we're able to pull ourselves out of the pain and the muck, you know, if we can find our poo or the piglet to our Eeyore, you know, then then we're able to start changing how we approach life. So that's what I help people do. And the way that I view it is that I want to be real. I want to be genuine to myself. I want to be true. And the way that I feel when I trust life is I'm relaxed, I'm engaged, I'm authentic, and I'm loving. Can I approach myself that way? Can I approach life that way? Sometimes. But that's the goal, right? It's like to be real, relaxed, engaged, authentic, and loving. And when that happens, I'm generally able to kind of have my energy be flowing versus stagnant and stuck. And flow for me is, am I able to feel what's going on? Am I able to listen to it, to open to it, and be in the state of wonder? Because that depression is, it can have so many manifestations, but it's very, well, maybe I shouldn't tell you how it is. I should ask, what does like the tactile sense of that depression feel like for you?
For me, depression can be very debilitating. It makes me want to check out. You know, there was a point where when I was single that I would just sit in my room. I wouldn't come out. As soon as I got home from work, I went to my room, I got in my chair, and I stayed there until it was time to go to bed. I didn't want to interact with anyone. I didn't want to go nowhere. Didn't want to do anything. And it basically led to a breakdown. I'm not kidding. You're talking about a breakdown. I didn't know that you could actually hear voices, and I did. And I ended up in my closet. My kids found me curled up in a ball, just crying. And I don't even know how I got in there. I didn't want to be like that anymore.
Thanks for sharing. I, I think there's that point that we get to where we hit that point. I don't want to be like this anymore. And we finally get to that point of I'm willing to change it. Or we say, I'm done. It's kind of binary, and I hate to say that. The third option is that we just stay stuck. And I think life calls us on an adventure. And there's so many arguments around the hero's journey, but at the end of it, it's like you are being called on an adventure. And when you say no to that adventure, when you deny that call, things start going poorly in your life. And so, you know, we don't know where the journey is going to take us. We don't know how we're going to fare on it. And that makes it really hard to say yes. And I think stepping into that unknown is one of the most brave and beautiful things that any human can do. And I view my role as saying, you're the one who has to walk your journey.
Mm-hmm.
I can point out some rocks that might be there along the way and walk with you. But it's like if you were to get a personal trainer at the gym, they can't lift the weights for you. They can't run for you. And so if we want to get in shape, we have to say, okay, am I going to do this? And then it's working with somebody to make sure that you're not starting at a weight that's so heavy, right? Because if you go into the gym after not working out for however long and you're trying to push around a lot of weight or go run 20 miles, one, you're going to get hurt. Two, you're going to fail. And we're all going to fail, but it's really important to get some easy wins early on so that we can start building some confidence, right? And the way that I kind of say it is I want to find a personal practice with whatever I'm working with where I get to practice magic. And it has a component where it's mindful. There's a mindfulness component. It can be adaptable to meet me where I'm at in a moment. It's gentle. And gentleness is hard for people. And, I think sometimes when I say gentle, people are like, oh, it's soft. I say, no, it's gentle. If you're going 120 miles per hour and you slam on your e-brake and try to go to zero really quickly, that is not gentle. Going from 120, maybe just taking your foot off of the gas pedal is the first step. And then the car starts to go slow down. And so then you're going 110, 100, 90, 80. You're just not fueling the old system anymore. And then you can start applying pressure onto the brake, and it's not so gentle, or it can be gentle on your system. We should find practices that inspire us so that we can keep doing them, Depression is a massive lack of inspiration. You literally can't breathe with depression. You can take your breaths, or your breath is shallow. You're not taking full life-giving breath. And life feels flat. And so finding something that can inspire us, even just a little bit, maybe it's a poem, maybe it's a quote, maybe it's, the door slamming behind me and saying, wow, what a gift that is too, that I have a house, something that inspires. And then we want to find something that brings us into connection with both ourselves and with others, or something greater. And so if I can cultivate a practice of magic that is magic, life tends to resolve itself.
What do you think about this philosophy of fake it until you make it?
Uh, it has a place. It has a place, and I think it can be a slippery slope. If faking it until you make it helps you move, like if you're just crushed and you're immobile and you need to fake it until you can make it so that you can have some movement happening in your body, in your life, it works. But I don't think that we can gaslight ourselves into authentic change.
Mm.
And so I think it's if you can be honest with yourself and say, like, I don't feel this way, but I'm going to do this action. Like, let's take smiling, right? And being happy. It's like, I don't feel happy. I feel miserable, but I'm going to smile because that is my practice. I'm smiling. Then you are working with a practice. If you're saying, I'm just going to fake being happy until maybe I eventually am, you're just covering up the pain. And so I really do think it changes based off of how you're approaching that fake it until you make it.
How do you begin when you first have a customer?
So the first question that I start with is right to the point, which is how do you want to be? And people get thrown because people say, well, this is what I want to do. Like, it's not the question. The question is, how do you want to be? And they'll say, oh, well, I want to feel this way. Like, feeling is nice, but how do you want to be? And being is not just an emotion and it's not an action, it's an embodied state. And so I'll ask that question, and generally we'll start exploring and digging. And the reason that that's important is because it helps to establish a compass. And once we've established that compass of this is how the next iteration of you wants to be, the you that's asking to come online, how it wants to be, that becomes a compass that allows us to navigate the terrain of our lives and figure out and identify the areas where we're not being that way or where it's very challenging for us to be that way, and to recognize the patterns that lead to us being stuck. And through identifying those patterns, working with some different techniques, we're able to transform them and realize that, we're already, it sounds so cliche, like we are already perfect, right? The challenge that I see is that when we're carrying around a lot of weight that isn't ours, it feels heavy. It feels like lead, right? This is alchemy, turning lead into gold. But when that weight is heavy, it is exhausting. And then as we go through the transformational process, it starts to lighten up a little bit and we get to be free from it. And I think that's beautiful, but also a really dangerous place because we can get stuck in that, like, oh, I just want to be free from all of my responsibilities and I want to be free from any weight. And I think that's where people get stuck in the plant medicine path a little bit too. And the intention of alchemy is to not just turn that lead into nothing, but to allow it to become gold. And I find that when we are the radiant expression of ourself, when we allow all of ourselves to be there, the weight that we carry, the responsibility that we get to work with, is something that we say yes to. And there's not a question of, do I want to engage in life? It's like, oh no, I want to engage with this. I want to engage in this way. And that is when we become truly powerful. And the lead, the heaviness, all the crap in our lives that we want to bitch and moan about, and rightfully so, you know, it becomes the soil for our growth. If we don't have it, then we wouldn't be who we are. But even if you don't like who you are, you still have it. And I would say that it's going to be far more productive to learn how to break it down, digest it, take the nutrients from it, crap out what you don't need anymore, and go forwards instead of sitting there feeling heavy and stuck.
So you help with physical and emotional well-being of people.
Yeah, you know, the training that I have is more along the energetic front.
Mhm.
So I don't like using the word shamanism, but it is. They're shamanic practices. And so, you know, if you go break your arm, go see your doctor and have your arm set. But then come see your shaman about why you broke your arm. And so, you know, I've worked with people who are experiencing gut issues and other health issues where they are also working with a functional health doctor or a Chinese medical doctor or somebody along those lines. But when it comes to working on the energetic front, that's kind of where I come into play. And especially when it comes to those mental, emotional illnesses and challenges, that I would say is one of my areas of expertise. You know, if very rarely, and I think this is my perspective. I do not want to say it as the truth, but it is my perspective. I think that the medical industry has a challenge with over prescribing
I agree.
and misdiagnosing. And if you are having a depressive episode, most likely, in my experience, it is not because your brain chemistry is broken. It is because your brain chemistry is working just fine, but the things in your environment and by your environment, I mean both your internal and external environment, need to shift. And so working with an antidepressant can be beneficial, but if the idea is to say you're going to be on this antidepressant for the rest of your life because you have depression and you're broken, I don't buy into that. So I would say, okay, you are experiencing depression. What does that feel like? What is the somatic understanding that you have of that? What does it feel like in your body? And we could do a very general coaching dynamic and say, like, think about the last time that you didn't feel that way. What was going on in your life? Compare your life now versus what was going on then. And we'll see that, like, maybe I had community back then. I was participating, I was active, you know, great. There's some structural things that you can change. But if you're dealing with heartache, And I'll just make it personal. Sorry.
No, it's
Like
okay.
it's a tricky topic, but like if you're dealing with loss because somebody in your family dies, it is healthy to feel sad about that. It just is. And there's nobody that can tell you how long your grieving process is going to take. When your grieving process starts challenging you, there's an impetus to start moving on. Because otherwise, we'll stay stuck in the grieving process forever. Because it helps us to hold on to that person. And that's the dynamic of transformation. When we transform, we are losing our previous self. Transformation is inherently unsafe to who you currently are. It doesn't mean that it's not good for you. It doesn't mean that it's not natural. It doesn't mean that it won't be beautiful. But there is a process of moving on from how you have been. And if somebody says, I don't want to move on, I'm not here to make you move on. But I will say, if you don't move on, here's what that will continue to feel like.
Is there a consultation fee?
There's not. So whenever I talk with people, I offer a free 30-minute consultation called the Purposeful Path Call. And it's really trying to just understand, where are you right now on your journey? Like, what's going on? And whether it is working with me doing the journey of alchemy and kind of changing the foundational dynamics of how energy is flowing through your life, or whether it's saying, yeah, no, you just need to start this practice and you don't need to work with me at all. My goal through those calls is to make sure that by the end of it, you have a clear next step forwards on your journey. Because it sucks when we're feeling stuck. It is, there's nothing worse. It's like, I don't know where to go. I'm uncomfortable here, and yet I have no idea where to put my foot down next. And so we spin in circles, and then we're disoriented, and we're exhausted, and we're frustrated. And so, yeah, in those situations, sometimes taking any step forwards is great. But most people, when they get to that point, there's that anxiety of like, well, what if I make the wrong move? Like, that anxiety is rooted in a deep, deep care and love of oneself, and wanting to make sure that you are tending to yourself as you should. And so maybe tending to yourself is like, no, dude, you're right. Any step forward is going to be the correct one. And other times, having a space to go and get some reflection on where you're at, what's going on, and to work with somebody is a really useful supportive tool on our journey.
What is your website?
People can find me at www.alchemyshift.com.
And I didn't see any social media.
I am not there. That's at the moment, that's very intentional. I know where I get distracted, and I'm trying my best to tense my own energy, and it's a fun, quick dopamine hit. I'll do it sometimes. I'm not never on there, but building out a business and putting out the promotional dynamics on there is just not where I feel called to spend my time and energy.
Gotcha. I am going to put the link to your website in the description just to make it easier for folks to find you. Michael, thank you so, so much for coming on the show today.
Appreciate it, Kyle. Thank you.
And you're always welcome back.
Appreciate it.
And I also want to thank all you folks out there. If you are new to the channel, I hope you'll come back. Please hit the subscribe button. For my regulars, you guys are awesome because you make it possible for me to do this. Until the next one, everyone, please take care. Be kind to one another. God bless and peace.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Listen to the Vibes. You can catch us on Buzzsprout or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts, and on YouTube. Follow us on Facebook at The Vibes Broadcast Network